Hey, good morning. Scott Luton, Greg White, and soon to be Enrique Alvarez is with you here today.
There he is.
Oh, Enrique, good morning. Greg, good morning. How are y'all doing?
Hey there.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys.
I think that was one of my favorite openings of all time, Greg. So, everybody, welcome to the Supply Chain Buzz. So much to talk about here today on the heels of a disappointing loss. Right, I was a bandwagon Chiefs fan last night for our dear friend Greg White, so that was disappointing. But despite it all, and we've all been there, it was a neat departure for the country to get past all the challenges and the turmoil from all these recent months to at least enjoying a football and pregame music and just the incredible event that is Super Bowl. Right, Greg?
No, absolutely not. But I appreciate your enthusiasm, Scott. It was not worth it at all, frankly. But I appreciate the joy that other people might have felt in watching that.
So, my condolences do go out to the White family. I know they are y'all long time Chiefs fans. Enrique, what did you and your family do to watch the festivities?
Oh, we just had some grilled chicken wings and just had some couple beers, and we watched the show and we really enjoyed it. It was I am a soccer fan, as some of you all already know, so I didn't have like a big allegiance either way, but just watching someone that old perform at that level, it's just something that kind of I really enjoyed, especially because just a good way of saying, hey,
we're old.
Right, but hey, we can still, at least some of us can still do it, right?
So I did see a really interesting thing, guys, and that is they showed a picture of over the course of the couple of weeks leading up, George Blanda, who had been the previous oldest playoff quarterback with the Raiders, played till he was 43. He was, at the time, quarterback. This was before Ken Stabler became quarterback. He was quarterback, kicker, punter, field goal kicker on the team. I mean, this was, mid-70s probably, when I guess players played a lot more positions. And when you see the picture of George Blanda, who looks about 70 at 43, right, and Tom Brady at 42 or 43, whatever, it is a stark difference. I guess maybe 50 is the new 40. I'm not sure, but and 43 is the new 35 or whatever it is, because he looked substantially younger. It was really, really interesting to see. And clearly he plays like it.
Yes. Well, so a lot of interesting storylines, even though we didn't like their bottom line results. But we'll see. I'll tell you, we're moving into baseball season now. So pitchers and catchers are going to be reporting here really soon. And of course, the Braves, our dear Atlanta Braves, re-signed Marcell Ozuna here last week. So that's been really cool. But I digress, Greg and Enrique. We could talk about sports. In fact, we'll have to have another one of our Supply Chain Nerds Talk Sports episodes. But let's today is all about Supply Chain Buzz, right? Every Monday, 12 noon Eastern time, we tackle some of the leading stories across global supply chain, really global business. And Greg, Enrique joins us occasionally. Of course, Enrique and Vector Global Logistics lead our Logistics with Purpose series, very popular. And soon, Supply Chain now in Espanol, which is launching right around the corner. But today, Greg, Enrique is going to be talking about some of the crazy things we're seeing, not just in the global logistics market, but especially with containers and sea shipping. So stay tuned. You're not going to miss that here in about 20 minutes as we dive into that. Greg and Enrique, y'all ready to get started?
Let's do it.
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, let's do it. So let's open with a couple of programming notes really quick. So first off, if you enjoy our live stream, be sure to check out our podcast today. Speaking of sports, we published JP Wiggins with 3G TMS, where we talked about transportation management and baseball. JP is an umpire, and he donates his paychecks to charity, Greg, if you recall.
Yeah.
And he loves baseball. In fact, he's got a name we were talking about in the episode. He kind of sounds like a AAA left fielder, doesn't he, Greg? JP Wiggins.
Yeah,
Sounds like
absolutely. Absolutely does. And why do I imagine he's a pretty colorful personality? Why do I imagine he's got a great "you're out" hook?
Right.
You know.
You know what? I should have asked him to do that. I missed you on that episode, Greg. Well, y'all check that out wherever you get your podcast from. And today we had a special guest lead our This Week in Business History. Kelly Barner jumped in. She loves business and, of course, loves history. And she talked about a couple of different things, but including where the word robot originated from. So y'all check out This Week in Business History wherever you get your podcasts.
I thought it was Will Smith. So it must have been earlier than that.
Just a smidge earlier than the Fresh Prince. So we got 2 webinars really quick. So we got to say hello to a few folks too, but February 17th, we're talking about supply chain transformation with our friends from Mars and Kinaxis. Greg, you looking forward to that one?
I am. First of all, anything where we talk about candy and supply chain together, I'm all about. But also, we have done a lot of work with the folks at Kinaxis, and I have not got to talk directly to Ann Robinson yet. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I am too. Hey, I got to share, and we're going to say hello to a few folks in a minute. But Simon, was that an example of just in time with Enrique? Simon, yes. Well done, sir. I'm gonna have to go back and play that again. That was kind of
almost in time, yeah. But I don't think there's any service penalty for that, Enrique. I think it was close enough that there will be no service penalty.
I appreciate that, although I feel obligated to pay something after doing that. But I want to make sure that everything downstairs was okay for me to actually be here for a couple more minutes.
Awesome. February 23rd, we have a second webinar coming up with Omnia Partners. They've assembled a very diverse slate of speakers, especially from a sector standpoint. So check us out there, February 23rd at 12 noon with Omnia Partners. Now, let's say, and both of those webinar links are in the show notes. So check that out. We're after one click here to make it really convenient for our guests. All right, so let's say hello to a few folks. Y'all ready? Lee Hoffweber, booyah from Houston. Lee, you've been on fire. Really enjoyed the last couple of live streams with Lee. Jessica from Mexico, great to have you here via LinkedIn. AA, where's your badge? Gregory.
Sorry, AA. There it is.
There you go. AA, hello from Wichita. Me and the new aircrafts enjoying the minus 12 degrees Celsius.
My mom clued me into that the other day, and like 2 degree wind chill. So 2 degree Fahrenheit wind chill. There you go.
You know what we got to tee up, Greg? We ought to have AA and a couple of his most brilliant students.
Yeah,
part of the next generation join us for a live stream. Hey, we're gonna have to talk with you offline about that. But great to have you here with us, Lee. I guess the Jazz won last night, so congrats to your the Jazz. Davin, you can't do a live stream without Davin. Hope you're doing well.
True.
Up in Canada. Gary Smith, snowy Roslyn, New York.
Thanks,
sorry,
Gary. Sorry you're getting buried in snow, and thank you for the condolences. I told Scott I should be wearing a black armband today.
Abhishek, great to have you here via LinkedIn. Let's see here. Naif, great to have you via LinkedIn as well. Let's see. Tom Raftery. Hey, Tom, how you doing? Great. Really enjoyed your conversation with Corinne Bursa on your successful podcast. So great to have you here. And
we know it's warm where he is.
That's right. Pierre, great to have you here. Good afternoon to the Buzz. Great to have you joined in with us once more, Pierre. Okay, gentlemen, we need to dive into no shortage of news, and let's do that now. So first story, right out of the gate, we're talking about the Home Depot, right, based here in Atlanta, but we're talking about Dallas, the big D. So in 2017, the Home Depot announced a $1.2 billion investment in supply chain. As Shafali Kapadia reports here via Supply Chain Dive, an outstanding reporter at Supply Chain Dive analyst, the fruits of that investment are starting to show as Home Depot has opened last week the 1.5 million square foot fulfillment center in Dallas. It's going to be handling, as you might expect, store and online orders via their popular store pickup, right? BOPUS, or last mile delivery to customers. And, Home Depot has been using these zero emission hydrogen powered forklifts since 2015. And a big part of the story is how they've got that completely throughout this facility. The company, Greg and Enrique, says that Dallas is a key hub for its supply chain strategy because they want to reach 90% of the U.S. population for same day and next day delivery. 90%. We should point out, to be fair, that Lowe's, when they heard the news about the Home Depot's investment, they came out with a little investment news of their own a year or so ago. They are making a $1.7 billion investment in Lowe's supply chain. So they upped the ante a little bit in this do-it-yourself arms race here, and for good reason. According to Statista.com, the do-it-yourself market in the U.S. grew from just over $400 billion in 2019 to over $457 billion in 2020. How about that, Greg? What's your take here?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, and a big name that we didn't mention is Ace Hardware, who has always had a superior supply chain to either of these entities and is particularly differently challenged because their stores are effectively franchisees who can select to engage or disengage in the supply chain. But it is good to see these two and see Home Depot to start catching up with Lowe's, who has traditionally had a stronger supply chain, particularly in the stores. If you've ever shopped the stores, I think you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's fantastic to see these companies make that investment and to acknowledge that a good portion of what they sell can be purchased and fulfilled in the store or from the stores, right? And, from online sales. So good to see some of these retailers making the leap to that. It's still, I got to tell you, and this is not on Home Depot or Lowe's, but it's still a little amazing to me that so many companies did not see that shift coming, or maybe that it just wasn't enough of their earnings or their revenue to invest in. But now it's reached that sort of hurdle point, right? A threshold where they can justify investing in it, or can no longer justify not investing in it, is likely the case for most retailers. Excellent point, Greg. Enrique, any comments?
No, I kind of just echo what Greg was saying, and it's just really, it's just following up all the things that we're seeing in the world these days. You just have to invest. It's just going to be a technologically play going forward, and so whoever makes those first investments and is a little bit more strategic about their money, I think they're going to get the upper hand. So,
excellent point. Excellent point. Hey, we ought to feature Tom's commentary here. I appreciate. Tom's very passionate about climate change, sustainability, and I appreciate that. Tom says 98% of the world's hydrogen is produced by steam fracturing methane, making hydrogen a de facto fossil fuel. I did not know that. And anything but zero emissions, #greenwashing. Good comments there, Tom. I had no idea. There's not a whole bunch of mention in along those lines in what comes out of the communications office related to this article. So,
there's a lot of that, right? Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. The supply chain doctor, Chris Barnes, says, big statement. Ace has a better supply chain than the big boys. Greg, hey, it wouldn't be a buzz without big, bold statements, especially.
I've worked with all three of them, so I know. I know the intricacies of their supply chain,
right?
Each, so.
Well, great reporting. I really enjoy what Supply Chain Dive does, and Shafali Kapadia. And by the way, congrats. Have we congratulated one of our favorites over there, Greg? Recently moved over to Business Insider. Emma
Cosgrove?
Yes, Emma Cosgrove.
I think we mentioned that a couple weeks ago.
All right. Well,
yeah.
Congratulations to her. We're looking forward to seeing her reporting with her new organization.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting if she can. Is she going to continue to focus on supply chain, do you think, over there?
I have not caught up with Emma since the move. I know
Emma. This is your chance to sound off.
That's right. But it will be interesting. You know, she's got so much, while a lot of passion and knowledge in the supply chain space. Interviewing her here, Greg, we know that she's got a lot of interest in other aspects as well. So it'll be interesting to see how her reporting does evolve. So it's also interesting to see supply chain costs in general, how they're mounting in a variety of ways here. And we're going to get Enrique to speak to one of these here momentarily. But first, let's talk about this great article by Claire Jones over at Financial Times. So this article cites a few examples of how costs are rising and how companies are trying to get their arms around these rising costs. So, for example, German car makers are reportedly considering building up their computer chip stockpiles due to the global shortages that we've spoken about for weeks, if not months now. Now, of course, Greg, that flies in the face of traditional just-in-time methodology that you typically find in automotive, right? Where folks can stockpile their cash and purchase just in time and bring it in just in time. So, but I think that speaks to just how much concern there is around these chip shortages and how long that may be with us until that industry can keep up with demand, where chips are going into everything. Let's see here. Secondly, coming from this article, Peloton. Talk about folks that have been front and center so much here in recent months. Peloton is spending $100 million in the next 6 months on air freight and expedited ocean freight to get around what it is calling, quote, longer than acceptable wait times. I don't know if y'all saw that last week. There was a lot of buzz on social about a communication it had sent out to its customers. Did y'all see that, Greg or Enrique?
I saw that they are months behind on delivering on products that they've sold. Yeah. So they announced, I can't remember if it was a big earnings or revenue just before the weekend. But then I also saw that they are months behind on delivering on pre-sales, which is always a dangerous place to be. When that money gets spent before it gets fulfilled, that makes things really tough. Well,
so get this. So beyond the $100 million they're spending next 6 months on shipping, they also dropped $420 million not too long ago to acquire Precor, a fitness a fitness equipment manufacturer, right? Looking to tap into that capacity. So you could say life is challenging, but probably pretty good at Peloton. I don't know. I'll leave it up to the economic analysts, as Greg just kind of weighed in there. But what is undeniable, rather, is these freight rates. Man, it's illustrated by this Freightos Baltic Index that tracks China-Europe shipping. And, Greg also...
Baltic Index, huh?
Yeah, how about that? Let's see here. And, Bobby Holland, U.S. Bank team, speaking of the freight market in the U.S., also shared data not too long ago about volume and pricing increases here. So it's everywhere. So to that end, we have got a supply chain leader and a dear friend that's got his finger on the pulse of what is going on in the global logistics, shipping, freight, transportation market, whatever, your pick. So Enrique, I know we've got a few things that some prepared information we're going to share with our team here, our community here momentarily, but give us just a few opening observations.
Yes, no, of course. And thanks again for having me. It's always fun to hang out with you too. And of course, your esteemed listeners out there. So the first thing is Peloton's not alone, right? So what they're suffering and what they're struggling with, everyone else is struggling with it. And the thing is, for people that might not actually know as much in terms of how the container shipping industry works, there's, of course, a limited amount of containers around the world. There's always this different equipment balances and imbalances that come from the different demands and between the imports and the exports. So, for example, and being very concrete with this particular problem, China exports a lot, the US imports a lot from China, Europe imports a lot from China and Asia and in general. And due to the pandemic and the coronavirus, all that balance of the containers has been completely affected. And so there's, in long story short, a lot of containers that are where they shouldn't be. So people in China cannot load them as quickly as they usually load them. And there's on top of all that, a shortage in the amount of containers. So the container pool around the world is just not enough compared to the demand that we're seeing, which has caused this incredible tidal wave that's consuming a lot of the different companies here in the US and around the world. And they're starting to affect many other things, from the actual equipment shortage to the increase in the ocean freights, to the port congestions, to the trucker availability, to having less equipment and less chassis. And it's like a snowball effect that's probably going to continue to go on for at least another 6 to 8 months. I think that the whole year is going to be a little bit of a catch-up game, trying to fix the problem that we're in.
Wow. And as David says, it doesn't help that they keep dropping the containers in the ocean either.
No kidding.
That doesn't help at all. Yes.
How many? Is that really a significant loss so far, Enrique? I mean, we lost thousands or anything like that. Is that significant to the impact?
No, and I probably should have the number handy for this call, but I don't know exactly how big the container pool around the world is. But no, the few that we've been losing is probably not going to make a big impact. But it definitely adds to the problem. And the other thing that's going to add to the problem is the weather. And this is something that weather always affects. And and now we're starting to see the snow in the Northeast, and we're going to start to see cold temperatures in the Midwest, and then that just continued to impact the already kind of fragile supply chains that some of these most companies have.
Well, and I think one of the things we've seen is that these companies continue to sail into rough seas, whereas there used to be a sailing season, right, with the trade winds. Now, because these are, fuel-powered vehicles, they don't have that constraint, but they do continually sail into rough seas, which both impacts the time across the ocean and the potential loss here. Is there a foundational problem? I mean, that you know of, Enrique? I know this is kind of a tough question, but is there a foundational problem? Has shipping shifted enough that we ought to have more containers, or is this just a temporary issue that will resolve itself?
No, and I think we started seeing this early in 2020 when the pandemic, and honestly, I would venture to say that this is all attributable to coronavirus. I think from a forecasting standpoint, and from the way that shipping lines have conducted and the way that the container manufacturers have conducted, I think they were having a really good hold of how many containers they were going to need, how many they were going to be retiring every year. But no one was, of course, expecting what happened in 2020, and that's something that, going forward, Greg, shows definitely a deeper issue, but no one really knew it, and now we all are pretty aware of it.
So, is there any semblance of market manipulation here? I mean, in terms of, we keep hearing that containers are going back to China empty, and it seems to me that it would be loath for an ocean-going vessel to go back anywhere empty with what it costs to do that. So, is there any reason to expect there's something nefarious going on here?
Well, your guess is probably as good as mine at this point. I mean, one thing I can tell you from a personal experience is that you can't really rule anything out at this point. After the year that we're having, I wouldn't be surprised if there's anything out there that's kind of beyond reasonable. But in general, no. In general, I think that people are really smart. There's really good companies. There's more good people in the world. And I think that it's just a matter of reacting to something that was just so beyond everyone else. But that's just me personally speaking.
Seems like Peter Bolle has a different opinion.
Yes. I love that.
Well, there's always a lot of conspiracy.
He's retired, so he can say that.
That's right. He says supply and demand being played with by external sources. David also says read that navigators have been told to be taking most direct route speed, and this has contributed to some routes sailing in the rough seas instead of around problem areas.
Mhm.
You know, and Enrique, we're gonna have you walk us through a couple of more data and observations here in a minute. But I would just look. I'm not a transportation market analyst, right? I want to make sure obligatory disclaimer. But I wonder, you know, a couple years back when China really shut down the amount of waste that it was accepting, right, from around the world. I wonder, Enrique, if kind of how those sailings and now the elimination of those sailings and how maybe a lot of folks would put stuff on those ships that are taking those routine, you know, waste shippings to China. Once those things went away, I wonder if that stripped some of the consistency in sailings to China that now, you know, we're really missing in a very inconsistent world. Any observations there?
Yeah, no, I think everything. I mean, I think you're absolutely right about that. I think that definitely impacts the equipment imbalance and where the equipment is at all times, just similar to the tariff wars that we saw. Like any kind of impact or changes into the trade balances around the world is going to directly impact where the containers are, right? And once you actually impact where the containers are around the world, then there has to be a lot of different algorithms and smart people and companies thinking, well, how do I position this? How do I minimize the blank sailings? How make sure that I can maximize the equipment utilization? And yeah, and I guess to Greg's earlier point, the steamship lines and the carriers have been losing money for years and years, and now finally they're actually back to profitable. So it kind of helps them financially because they've been able to increase the rates as you put it on the chart there before we started talking about this.
So I got to share, we got a lot of passion coming from the community here. So starting with Sylvia, hey, there's nothing sketchy going on. It's simple math. Gary says, hey, there's 17 million containers in the world, but only 6 million are being used. I did not know that. Peter says, no need to be an analyst to see or know someone is profiting by manipulating the marketplace, not naming names, but David says,
I know what name comes immediately to mind.
David says, old math or new math? They teach the kids now, Sylvia. And then one final one here, or two final ones here. Tom says, we all know that Bill Gates invested in container companies before releasing the coronavirus to stimulate demand for containers. Hashtag not really. I love that, Tom. And then finally, Sylvia says, all available containers are in the trade. Carriers are only taking equipment out of service if they are deemed total loss. So a mixture of really well-connected market observations and some sense of humor there. So y'all keep it up.
I think somewhere in the extremes, there is truth. I can assure you from having lived in Kansas City and in Springfield, Missouri, the home of ground transportation and the contributing families there too in the United States, and also having actually exported personally goods to Sylvia's home country, Germany, when I was in college to help put myself through there. There's never nothing sketchy going on in transportation, but it may not be substantial, just like the losses that we're talking about.
Well, there's inefficiencies, right? And there are always going to be inefficiencies. And now it's just like heightened by the pandemic. I mean, we can't really forget what started all this different issues, including all this incredible and sometimes entertaining conspiracy theories. It's part of the same thing, right? It's the pandemic.
So, all right. So we're going to walk through it. Enrique, of course, don't feel obligated to hit on all of these.
No, not at all.
But hey, one quick editorial, because we've talked about this a good bit, Greg, especially in recent months. Partnerships and knowing your partners and having those valuable relationships are more important than ever. And I'll tell you, Enrique is a man of honor, and while there might be plenty of reindeer games going on in the marketplace, that the integrity you bring to the conversation, Enrique, is one that we value highly here. So, Enrique, let's talk about some more of these observations that are going on in this world of global logistics.
Yeah, no, it's basically just what we discussed before, right? So there's really not a lot new into this slide that you're showing, but the the demand is up. Why? Because the buying patterns have shifted. Why? Because people are inside our houses, and it's just so easy to order anything these days using your phone and Amazon or whatever other I guess store that has online shopping that it has really changed a little bit of the patterns, and of course that, and it's reflected by the exports of Chinese goods in December, right? It jumped 18%, and you take a look at that, it's 34% more year over year in the US. So again, every time that you see like a different balance in the way that the trade works, you have to immediately relate it to where the containers are. So there's going to be a lot more containers coming in than going out, and that's starting to create all these different imbalances. So to kind of paint the picture as of what we've been facing over the last couple of months, at least here at Vector, and I'm sure that a lot of other logistic companies out there are facing the same thing, and everyone that's shipping, there's no containers in China. And we saw and shared some pictures of major ports in Asia and China, Shanghai, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, and there's just not enough containers to be loaded. So the steamship lines are skipping some ports. They're, of course, closing some of the smaller ports. They're closing some of the feeder services, and feeder services are container ships that kind of transport the containers from the not so big ports in Asia to the mega ports in Asia, and then before they go into Europe and some other parts of the world. So if you start kind of seeing that, and you starting canceling some of those services, and you start saying that there's not enough containers to load, then you know that you're going to have a problem, and that's going to be impacting the prices, and the prices have skyrocketed, as you mentioned. And the other thing,
Enrique, 63 container ships in the harbor Thursday, 39 awaiting berths.
That's where I was going, right? Because that's the first part of the story is told in wherever the manufacturing is happening, in this case, Asia and China. But the second part, which is something that's hitting us now and will continue to hit us, is just the port congestion in the U.S. and Long Beach, California, being it's the largest port in the U.S. And of course, that's the one that's being hit the hardest. But all the different ports are starting to feel the effect of this.
The burn. Okay. So let me share a couple comments here. Let's see here. First off, Francisco, we mentioned supply chain now in Espanol. Now, Enrique, you're leading that up for us, and I appreciate that because my Spanish is not up to par yet. But that's going to be published in its own channel, and it's premiering. It's just right around the corner. Is that right?
That is correct. And Francisco, muchas gracias. Esperamos escucharte a ti y a todos los que nos están escuchando que hablan español. Hay varios ahí en los chats. So we'll be launching in a couple more weeks. We still don't have the official launch date, but we'll make sure to let everyone know exactly when that's going to happen. We already have a couple of very interesting interviews that we have pre-recorded for at least the first couple of months of the new series, and I'm very excited. I mean, it's just going to be a blast. It's just going to be fun, and it's really the same kind of vibe and culture that you and Greg and the rest of the supply chain now team have developed in the U.S.
Love it, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more and making it easy for folks just like me. Unfortunately, I speak one language. That's shame on me. But folks, that where Spanish is their first language, make it really easier to gain information and insights and whatnot. So, Enrique, appreciate your leadership there. Let's see here. I'm going to share a couple of comments. Peter likes the movie name Reindeer Games. That's a new one to me. So, Peter, you have to fill us in. Tom, your ears may have been burning, my friend. But he says Enrique is a class act. I agree, TV. He is.
Thank you, Tom.
Tom Raftery says teleportation to the rescue. How cool would that be? Like Star Trek, right? You here to there, and you just press a few buttons and things.
You don't even need shit.
That and 3D printing now, right? So you can start manufacturing locally.
Well, Vector, we need to make Vector needs you better start building out a new boutique service for teleportation, Enrique. Yes.
We'll put a beam right here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy. Anna Mary says, late but here. Great to have you here, part of the supply chain city here in Atlanta. Peter says, is it just me or does supply chain now sound sexier?
I also learned something too. I did not know chat was a masculine noun. Los chat, right? Is that what you said? That is what you said, right?
I think so. Oh man! All right, and Lee.
I mean, this is a lesson on many levels, folks.
Agreed. It always is, right? We learn so much from each of these live streams. It's amazing. Okay, so Enrique, as we start to wind things down on your logistics insights, any other key points? And of course, I've got information if we need to share anything. Any other key points that you want to make before we move on to slavery in supply chain?
No, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just really 4 things I think that could probably be helpful out there. And one, it's just information. I think there's a lot of information. However, I guess the main media doesn't really pick up on all these things that are critical to our livelihoods, right? Because that's the way that we're shipping things all over. So just stay informed, make sure that you kind of keep track of, I mean, not necessarily how many vessels are parked outside Long Beach, although there's kind of very interesting and fun pictures. Well, fun, quote unquote fun, but there's a lot of pictures around that. The other thing is just be open to new ways of shipping. There's different ports, not only the big ports. I would kind of try to divert certain shipments instead of trying to go into Long Beach right now. And this might be already late for some, but maybe even Seattle, Tacoma, some other ports, and then trucking it down. I mean, just try to kind of play a little bit with that. And the other is just prioritize, right? I think that the example that you gave about Peloton spending $100 million just to airship some of those orders, that's it. That's what I think we have to learn from this. And it's just, if you want to make sure that some of those orders, if they're critical, if they're important, you're going to have to, think of prioritizing them, shipping them some other way, and then also be aware that you're going to have to pay the extra premiums. There's just no way around that, unfortunately.
But if you no way around it, but plan. And we also shared kind of a four key best practices around information, strategy, action, and communication. So if y'all are interested in comparing notes with Enrique, I think we've got his LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, just let me know. And I guess just the last thing that I want to say on this is everyone thought that with Chinese New Year coming, that was going to solve the problem. And it's just now more than clear that it's not, right? So everyone was hoping that, well, this is going to go maybe Q1, maybe April will be over. In my experience with what I'm seeing and all the clients that we've been working with, this is probably a little bit longer than that. So let's just, let's be ready for it.
And you were looking forward to some sleep, Enrique.
I really was, but then now it turns out some manufacturing in China is going to skip Chinese New Year to try to help with this problem. But
yeah.
So Sylvia says Charleston has 0 backlog. How about that?
Yeah, and I think Savannah and Jacksonville are largely the same, and that ties a lot to what we talked about, which we're going to talk about with the freight payment index, and that is that so many people they're taking the additional step of going through the canal to these East Coast ports. Now, the difficulty is, if I assume, Enrique, the difficulty is if you have to have a distribution point on the West Coast, it may be better to stay in
maybe in Houston, but yeah, you'll have to see.
Yeah. Give me a ring. My Aunt Edna has a beach home up in the upper Northwest, and we can contract something out, can't we, Greg and Enrique? We'll see.
Yes. Let's definitely contact your aunt, and we'll.
Yes, we need to deepen her. Well,
I think, when the tariffs hit, there were a lot of people. Not that it's shifty. I wouldn't say that, Sylvia. There were a lot of people going to Vancouver and then trucking across the border. So, I mean, there may be an option to use some other West Coast ports for sure.
Right. As Peter says, intermodal, baby. Put it on a train, still better than nothing at all. AA says supply chain is global in all formats. Not going to be over till the end of the year. So a lot of different comments here. David appreciates your insights here today, Enrique.
Thanks, David.
And Francisco, hey, we'll make sure, appreciate your kind comments there. We'll make sure that we get back to you on supply chain now in Espanol. Okay. So we were talking about the Chinese New Year a second or two ago. Let's talk about another story that is tied to a certain portion of China and unfortunately other parts of the world. But this report, which comes to us from Charles Kennedy, over at allprice.com. Hey, new one for me. But this is a neat story. Good reporting. About 175 solar manufacturers and power companies are determined to fight forced supply chain labor in China and other parts of the world. This includes companies like Tesla and Duke Energy. They all pledged last week to create supply chain traceability that will be used to make sure their products do not benefit from forced labor in China's western region of Xinjiang, or anywhere else in the world for that matter. I want to make sure that's clear too. There's certain concerns in certain parts of the world for certain reasons. For example, so this is being led by an industry-wide association known as Solar Energy Industries Association, SEIA. Another acronym for us here in supply chain. But get this.
We need a bell for that.
Ding, ding. Yeah. Get this, Enrique and Greg and community here. According to the SEIA, an estimated 50% of the global supply of polysilicon is produced in this Xinjiang region of China, right? And this ingredient is key. It's essential to the manufacturing of solar modules. So that's one of the reasons why there's so much concern in this part of the world. So, of course, we should say this just to be balanced here. Chinese officials deny there's any forced labor in this region. So, Greg, I know this is a
Sorry. They also deny that Tiananmen Square ever happened. So
that is fair.
Let's treat that with its appropriate level of credibility.
So let me ask this to be each of y'all, certainly to Greg. So Greg, we've talked a lot about how, for many people, how surprising it is that slavery still exists in so many different aspects of global supply chain. So do you think this is a lip service PR move, or do you think that these groups can bound together to really drive some real change?
Well, they can certainly drive some real change if they want to. What they won't change is the slavery in Xinjiang. What they can drive is their refusal to participate in it. So it may not change anything in China, but at least if we change the economics, which is always the motivator, if we change the economics, that's our best chance of changing the actions. So I like that prominent organizations are tackling this, and I wish that more would. I don't know what additional industries would need to be employed here to solve this issue. But as much hand waving as there is over Xinjiang, and I'm particularly a hawk on slavery, as you know. The greater problem, by an order of magnitude, is in India, right? They still have somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 to 18 million people who are effectively operating in slavery. And that's over 10 times the number of people operating in slavery or working in slavery, living in slavery in Xinjiang. So there's a lot of work to do here. I think there is a little bit of PR impact here because that area has got the attention of Congress. But yeah, hey, look, we'll take whatever we can get, right? I mean, this is a problem that needs to be solved. And if we solve it here, perhaps then we can get more eyes on the problem in India and really make a difference there.
Yeah, well said there, Greg. Enrique, any thoughts here?
Yeah, no, modern slavery is about 40.2 million people. And I know this very clearly because my daughter, Emma, who's 11, is working on a project that has to do with this. And I was just amazed to find out there's just so many people being slaves, right? So to Greg's point, I think if you kind of follow the money and you try to force the demand, the supply will follow. So if you try to prevent the consumers, and I think the powers and the people that are actually buying all these different products, if we actually make an effort as a consumer not to buy from sources that have slavery or any other issues, or at least they don't have a certification that says that they're not being manufactured by slaves or children or anything else, you have to you can probably start changing the changing the landscape of this incredible and huge problem that we're facing.
I like that perspective. That's a complete change on those that say they are not engaging in slavery versus those who remain silent. I think if consumers will, and I think I've said this before, it hurts me because Adidas is deeply involved, especially in Xinjiang province, and those are about the only sports clothes that even remotely fit me. So if as everyone knows, I have fat thighs. So
I couldn't remember.
Oh, right.
So anyway, if we shift the viewpoint to say if you do not verify that you are not engaging in slavery, that would be really, really powerful. It's also very hard to do, but we do hold the purse strings, right? Ultimately, it does come down to us as consumers.
I wonder if you can even go as detailed as to say, well, I like Adidas, but I'm not going to consume anything that's manufactured in that country. And you can always buy products that are made by Adidas in maybe other countries or in other facilities. But no, you're right. I think we as consumers have the leverage we need to actually make impact in this world. And I think the new generations I think are very, very aware of this. And I think Greg has mentioned this many, many times before with his daughters. There's a shift coming. I mean, the shift's already starting. The people are way more aware than I am and Greg is and everyone out there is. I think the new generations actually have a much better understanding of what's fair and good and reasonable. And I think they'll do a much better job than the one we're doing now.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's so much more access, so much more transparency of information, right?
Agreed. I'm going to share a couple of comments here, and we're going to share a great nonprofit that's doing some big work here in the U.S. market. Fred Tolbert, what's his moniker, Greg?
What's that? Oh, the Doc Holliday of supply chain.
Yes, the Doc Holliday. Fred says major issue in the apparel industry. Completely agree there. Demo Perez. Demo, hey, great to see you. I hope this finds you well. Look forward to your interview or conversation that we're going to be releasing on the new series. Let's see here. Peter says more key supplier site visits are needed. And that's, of course, it's one of the big challenges, as we all know, in the pandemic, but I agree with you. Here, Ashish has a great a few questions via LinkedIn. Can the problem be solved, though? Realistically speaking, the slavery mentioned is an escape for them and a means to survive. Whereas corporations can talk about how slavery is a bad thing, but the lower costs cannot be ignored, right? So, Greg, I'm gonna. What's your take on Ashish's comments there?
So I'm not familiar with where Ashish is from, but there's never a right answer. The right answer is never that slavery should remain, right? Pay him $1 a day, pay him $1 an hour, whatever is a survivable wage, but forcing people to work against their will. I mean, let's just forget about Xinjiang province. I mean, arguably human trafficking is in and of itself slavery, and those people do get paid some small portion of the despicable acts that they're forced to submit to, I should say. And no, that's never the right answer. There is always an economic solution, and we can force that. I'll go back to, we can force that solution, right? If we as consumers are willing to accept just a slightly higher cost, these people can be free. And that to me is the answer. That's as politely as I can put it.
Yeah, well said there. Let me share this resource. So for first quarter 2021, we are very proud to be featuring Truckers Against Trafficking as our nonprofit of the quarter. These folks are doing awesome work, and thanks to Vector and Enrique for bringing them to our attention. If I got the numbers right here, they've trained over 1 million people, kind of things to look for when identifying human slavery victims in the States. And they've saved, Enrique, is that number? I think it was over 1,300 people they have rescued.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
From a life of slavery and sex trafficking and you name it. So these folks are getting it done. They need your support. Y'all check them out at truckersagainsttrafficking.org. And Amanda or Clay, if we could make sure we drop that into the comments as well, I would appreciate it. Okay, so look, appreciate both of y'all weighing in. I appreciate the comments from the frank comments from the community, as always. Huge challenge. Frankly, and not to conflate the two issues. Slavery in and of itself, Greg, to your point, never is there justification for that. But pay rates in general, pay rates across the manufacturing and warehousing and fulfillment. I think we're going to see a lot of conversations, a lot more conversations around that. It takes me back a couple of years ago. We had folks from Pro Logistics with us, and Pro Logistics staffs a lot of folks in that e-commerce and fulfillment warehouse space. And one of their senior leaders they had polled 10,000 people, and the majority of those people polled, most of those are workers, right? In these sites, most of them had to work 2 jobs just to make ends meet. And then just think about the hours and your lack of, if you're a parent, working those 2 jobs just to make ends meet, and you're not seeing your kids, just the overall quality of life. I think we're gonna see a lot more conversations around that in the months ahead. Or, as Greg points out, a lot more automation, right? A lot more automation, especially here in the States, to be able to keep up with the sheer demand. Okay, so I'll tell you, we have really tackled a bunch of heavy topics here on the Buzz. I think as we wrap, Enrique, what is here on the 8th of February? Hard to believe we're already 8th of right. February 2021. It seems like we were just celebrating the holidays, right? But what's one of the things maybe we hadn't talked about today? What's one of the things, I'm going to ask you both, one other issue or challenge or topic that we should be keeping our finger on the pulse of that maybe is not getting enough attention right now? Anything come to mind on your end?
No, I think we actually covered a lot, right? I mean, we went from multi-billion investments in new warehousing to modern day slavery. So there's not a lot to cover after that. But I think it's just a matter of caring and communication. I think that as we continue to face the challenges of this year and last year, I think we just have to come together as a country, as a world, as people, as individuals. I think that it's okay to disagree. And so I think one thing that we can probably continue to talk about, and I think it should always be a topic of conversation, is just welcome people's opinions, right? I think we just have to come closer together as one single, I guess, humankind, if you will, and try to resolve these issues that are already macro issues. So there's no local solution for any of this.
Love that. Greg, what does that make you think of?
What it immediately makes me think of is I wish we could acknowledge some of the progress that has been made over time. I think there is a lot of hyperbole in terms of where we really are as a society and where we've really been as a society. Of course, there is just a ton of injustice in the world. But I think we need to acknowledge that progress has been made, because frankly, what I think we need is hope. And we need to see that the world is moving in the right direction. And if we could go back just a few years, I watched the Super Bowl as they talked about the 60s as if that was the recent past, 60 years ago, as if that was the recent past, and as if no progress has been made since the 60s. And that's clearly not the world that any of us have lived in. I just think we need to acknowledge the progress that has been made. And I think that's truly beneficial to us as well, because we can build on the platforms that have been raised up over the decades.
Well put, and unique perspective. We don't hear that enough, Greg. So I appreciate you making that comment. A couple of questions here as we wrap. Sylvia says, no, wrong Sylvia comment here. Sylvia says, thumbs down on Adidas. They're known for unfair labor practices.
That's got to be hard for somebody from Germany to say, as a German company. Die mag mit der Streifen.
That's a good point. Whatever you said there, Greg, great point. I agree with you. It's always a good thing to agree with Greg. So Tom says, anyone else curious where the other 43 Scott Lutons are? Well, Tom, thank you very much.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I was going to ask him the number 44 on his.
Yes.
Oh, got it.
So that's the whole reason we put it in there, right? I love getting asked. This is all about a testimony to Hank Aaron. Speaking of to Greg's point about some of the progress we've made, what's taken incredible people like Hank Aaron to absorb. I mean, think about all that through his journey of breaking one of the most revered records held by a white man, Babe Ruth, and all the evil that he endured and kept enduring. And then beyond all of that, you take it off the field and all the bridge building he did, and just how gracious the man. He moved mountains, right? Despite all that he endured. And what we are hoping and calling attention to is that, hey, his number 44 shouldn't just be on the shoulder patch of all baseball teams, and shouldn't just be retired for eternity. But I'm hoping that the Braves will rename maybe even the team, but certainly the field, Hank Aaron Field, or something, so that when folks talk about going to a Braves game, you talk about going to Hank Aaron's Park or something. It keeps that incredible man and his family. Really, you got to give, it's the whole family front and center of our minds. So there's even, Greg, as we've talked about here, a petition working its way around that to rename the team the Atlanta Hammers, right? Because Hammer and Hank, of course, many of y'all will know, was his nickname. So anyway, that's what it is. Thank you so much, Tom, for asking about it. I love to talk about it. His story deserves so much more than a couple minutes, and certainly so much more than a shoulder patch. And that's why we feature it here as we mourn his loss from a few weeks back. So Enrique, Greg, talk about wide-ranging Enrique. Yeah, we really what a
everywhere.
A full buzz episode here. But really appreciate both of y'all making time. Enrique, of course, we kind of went through your agent here at the last minute to get PR approval. No, but I know that snagging you on here was a last minute thing. But what you shared here today, I think, was very timely, and want to make sure our audience and the community can benefit from it. So, Greg, right as we sign off here, any final thoughts for our audience? And we're going to call it a day.
Golly. I think, gosh, we did cover so much here, right? I think an important thing is what Enrique said, frankly, is to echo that. And that is that together we can do this. We are far more together than is being represented today. And we have to acknowledge, again, I'm a follow the money kind of person. We have to acknowledge why hyperbole and division is being promoted so strongly, and that's because it creates ratings. And so many of these dying media outlets have to draw people in order to survive. And bad news draws people in more than good news. My suggestion is to engage less with that sort of messaging and engage more with your fellow humankind, where some of us are actually being allowed out, whether you can do that in person or through Zoom or just a phone call or Clubhouse. If anyone's not on Clubhouse, I can't believe it. But engage in those positive discussions and reinforce those positive feelings and evaluations and initiatives and understandings in the world, because the world you experience, and I think we recognize this probably the middle of last year, the world you experience is not the world that you're represented. So go and experience the world. It's a much better place than is represented.
Well said. Love that. And that will be our last comment here today. Really appreciate everybody joining us. Appreciate the wide-ranging conversation. Big thanks to Greg White and Enrique Alvarez. Of course, the whole team behind us that you can't see, Natalie and Clay and Amanda. Really appreciate that. No, thank you, Tom. It's so kind. But who shared that comment? I'm going to track down whoever shared that comment. But hey, more than anything else, I want to echo what the comments say. Hey, lean in to these conversations. Lean into the disagreements, right? It's okay to disagree. Understand, seek first to understand. That's a wonderful, in these fractious times, that's a wonderful message to take away from this conversation. So, and disagreement is a beautiful thing. Right? That's how you learn. So, but anyway, Check us out, supplychainnow.com, for more conversations just like this, where we're working hard to serve as a voice of the global supply chain and really the greater business community. But hey, Scott Luton, wishing you all nothing but the best on behalf of our entire team here. Greg's getting ready. Hey, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. Be just like our friend Enrique Alvarez. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Good seeing you. Have a
You
good
too.
one.